few of those are, first of all, he's super pragmatic. For someone who's the world's most famous anarchist or whatever at the time, extremely pragmatic. And I'll give two ways to that. The first is he's an anarchist who was supporting the Labour Party, which is a very bad party in historical terms, to in an electoral sphere in order to enter the state, because that would open up more possibilities. We get beaten up by the cops, we can call you, right? So even at the minimum, that it was useful. But he's also was extremely practical. David was not a remote thinker. Like, he was trying to apply it all the time in any activist group he's in, whatever he's in. He's trying to solve problems and do things, and to do that, and also to be, if you're in favor, obviously, is dialogue and consensus process and real democracy, you necessarily have to be pragmatic. He's also not dogmatic. He wouldn't put it this way. It's the way I put, but he's like verbs, not nouns. In that essay that Nika referenced at the beginning, I think it says, there are no isms in anarchism. They're not, you don't have the same kind of corpus of great, generally speaking, male theoreticians, because it's more of a practice. It's more of a doing. He's radical, like in the real sense of it, trying to go to the roots of what a particular system is to understand it. Extremely generous with time and people and what people's actual capacities are to do things. Creative, this is the possibilities point. So basically, like, the world is made and remade every single day, and therefore it's the fact it's possible to do it differently, but then keeping it the same way is an act, right? It takes a lot of effort to keep and the anthropologist taking basically naive, perhaps faux naive, but a naive outside look at a system of power to unpick or understand or to reveal its system of power, or its logics of power, which is often more what's unsaid than what's said, or what's done than what's written. And of course, active. The point is to change it. So I don't want to say worse, because that's too unidirectional or undialectical or whatever. But it's definitely bleaker, right? It's definitely starker. The reality. I mean, look at whichever issue you want to look at, but I'll probably zone in on three. Like, climate breakdown. Last month was 1.75 degrees above pre-industrial averages. El Nino weather systems finished, like, no one, it's not just it's really, really a lot hotter, and the scientists like, yeah, it's really bad, but we thought it was going to be really bad. They're like, oh my God, it's really bad. We had no fucking idea it was going to be this bad. Like, it's a lot, it's a lot starker than it was even 4.5 years ago. Imperial violence is just raw and unfiltered. Of the genocide in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing of Gaza now is just really, really stark, and the rise of the far right everywhere. Everywhere they're just doing better and better, better and better everywhere. So the contradictions in the system are they're like really in our face. Like, it's so clarified. But I remember something that David used to say, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, kind of around Occupy or after Occupy, which was like, I guess, in a message to, let's say, the left, us, the people in this room. It's like, okay, yeah, but you're not that smart, right? Like, your neighbors think exactly the same thing as you. Like, okay, they might not put in exactly the same sophisticated terms or whatever, but like, the system it broke. Everyone can see that. It's not the point. The issue is not that we are wrong in some way, or that people don't, constructing we and people as different things is obviously a problem. But anyway, it's not that we are wrong or the people don't know. It's that we collectively don't have any power. So, or our power is constrained within this given system. So, for this kind of attempt to bring some of David into these questions. I don't know, to like survey this hellscape that we're in, and what's it says on the gate in the Inferno, on the gates of hell, abandon all hope, ye who enter here, right? So in that there'll be, I think I've got 6 bits, right, 4 bits of dissent. But as Al remembers, in elsewhere in the Inferno, in Dante's own, what he says rather than what it says there, it says the path to heaven begins in hell. So we can have 2 points of ascent at the end, because you can't get to heaven without hell, and that's part of what the moment that we're in. So the first one, the death spiral of neoliberalism, the global system that is meant to have a set of rules, of course, written not in our interests and so on and so forth, but it's meant to have a set of rules which is meant to be able to govern the system, at least for the interests of course, the ruling class, and then some minority that it's also meant to serve. But it doesn't do that, right? It doesn't do that at all. Like, if you were trying to look at it from a kind of trying to apply a logical thing to it, the system would have done a few things differently, purely for its own benefit, purely to sustain the existing rule of the ruling class. Like in COVID, they would have released the formula to create the vaccines, rather than restricting them so that only a few companies could make them, right? They could have produced vaccines that could have vaccinated the entire world in 1 year, according to one study. And when the rules on intellectual property were written in the World Trade Organization, it was with the idea that this waiver would be released, i.e. the vaccine formula would be released if you had a global pandemic, which was killing millions of people and ruining, making rich people less rich in some cases. Not really, because the central banks created 9 trillion worth of dollars and massively inflated all of their asset values. But anyway, in theory, reducing businesses and so on. Obviously, climate breakdown. I mean, you can chart the first COP meeting in 1992, I think it was, and the trajectory of CO2 emissions. And if you're an alien coming from space looking at it, which is like, let's take the naive approach, let's take the David eye on it, look at it and go, yeah, no, nothing happened. Like, they weren't trying to do anything. There's no, the angle doesn't even slightly, they're not, it isn't doing anything. And then from the perspective of the system, allowing this absolutely like grotesque, insane genocide, which has turned the vast majority of people in the imperial core against imperial aims, is not sensible from the perspective of the system. So, like, what's going on? Like, the ordinary kind of most left approaches would try to focus on individual interest or greed, or is it really in some way in their material interest? David was a big fan of stupidity. No, not as in people being stupid, right? But as in it's a useful way to understand the world. And he's got, I think he would view this as there's a systemic stupidity that the elite have. I mean, he's got some nice stuff about, when you bop someone on the head, it's a response of a stupid person, because it's what you do when you can't say anything to anyone. Why is it that emotional labor always follows the curve of power, and violence follows the curve of power down the other way? Because if you don't need to know anything about anyone if you just can hit them on the head. And they've kind of got to that point, so they've developed a sort of systemic stupidity. So that's our first step down into through the gates of hell we've gone, and now we're into, I've not done the maths right. There's 7 circles, aren't there?
Yeah.
Okay, we're like 1.5 circles in. We're one step in. Yeah. Then imperial violence. Obviously it's like totally unmasked. totally unmasked, of course, in Gaza, of course, with Trump's ethnic cleansing plan, but also just like, no, Panama Canal, that's ours, mate. No, oh, the Arctic. Oh yeah, we're going to open that all up because it will all melt. And so we need to get Greenland because there's loads of iron and zinc and oil and more stuff under there. So we need to get it. And this shift from polite liberal empire, let's say, attempting hegemonic empire to just pure dominance empire, I think David would find very interesting, have a lot to say about. Particularly the thing I'm sure he'd have a really good joke, and I've been trying to think today about a good joke about it, but I've failed. But maybe someone else can, and please bring it to him about a sort of a David joke about USAID and Trumpy sacking off USAID, which is like, from an anti-imperialist position, absolutely bloody wonderful, because USAID is this, the aid agency of the US, which funds US-aligned NGOs and organizations around the world that have contributed to regime change operations and so on. But they think it's woke, and there's a as in they, it's in the Trumpists, and there's just like an amazing thing that their stupidity is playing a role, but it's not stupid for them. They're trying to signal we're moving from the attempted hegemony straight to dominance. It's like, do what we say or else we hit you. We're not going to try to more subtly control your media, or we're not going to fund all of your parliamentary candidates that are going to be pro EU or pro US. Anyway, so of course, all of this is very bleak and clarifying, but it's clarifying in a way which completely tallies, I think, with David's insights. So I remember reading Debt for the first time and being really struck by how he looked at the basic sort of Adam Smith story about how economy grows. Like, well, first we do some agriculture, and then we start getting really good at the agriculture. So we have some surplus, and then we take this surplus, so we're able to invest that in some manufacturing, and then we do the manufacturing, and then we've got so much stuff that we don't know what to do. So then we go and do trade. And obviously Dave's like, no, if you're saying it's that, it's probably the other way around. Like, starts with trade, which is conquest, colonial violence, etc. That's then used for manufacturing, and it's only at the end you actually do have the big step changes in agricultural production, and I think which has been going on now for over 500 years. We live in the colonial mode of accumulation. David was really good at taking, I think, or mixing the economic ideas with what are the ideas that actually underpin it? What are the actual structures that underpin it that are hidden or occluded with a supposed only focus on the economic? And there's anyway. Next, I'm probably overdoing it, and you have to run for a train, so I'll take us deeper into hell. Did you see that second row of Trumpy's inauguration? Did you see them, the ones that they had? So the first row is obviously it's a family business, it's a mafia, etc. You've got Jared Kushner, who, by the way, sorry, just as an aside, do you know whose childhood bed Benjamin Netanyahu sleeps in when he goes to New York? Jared Kushner's childhood bed. He's like old friends with his dad, and he prefers to stay in their home, and he stays in the childhood bedroom. Anyway, it's so fucking creepy. Anyway, so behind that the family, there's our new tech overlords. There's the ones that sort of say it with their chest. Well, not really with their chest, with their thumbs, right? There's Elon. There's the sort of the dweeby one that now is like, no, we'll do fascism for you. That's cool. All of them, they're all lined up, and I mean, David would have so much to say about this because he's got this amazing essay called "Of Flying Cars or on the Declining Rate of Profit." which I was thinking about because on Saturday I went and watched Back to the Future, the musical, and then watched Back to the Future 2 and 3 on TV on Sunday. I say TV on, the TVs don't exist anymore. It's all the stream, but you know what I mean. And it's amazing looking at what they think in 1985 they thought that 2015 would be, and it's the same point as that David's making in that essay. It's like we all thought that things were like we were going to have loads of stuff, not just this and this. Which I mean, this is not even. I mean, this they had in some form in the 1950s. So yeah, where was it anyway? So why is it that again, with all of the all the money put into technological progress, it's basically stopped, and instead it's converted into new means for surveillance and for control. And we're seeing this now like firmly fused. Beforehand, it was like business, tech, the tech elite, they're separate from the state, they're libertarian, it's the state that's trying to regulate them, etc. And now Elon Musk has his hands over tax records, who's employed by the state, and so on. So, and which maybe think there's a quote from Graeber, which is bureaucracies are not themselves forms of stupidity, back to stupidity, so much ways of organizing stupidity. And I mean, there's nothing more stupid than sadly us sitting in bed scrolling our screens. But then there's also going back to the stupidity of just banging people on the head. AI creates the targets and automatically fires or sets the targets for the bombing in Gaza. Like the death is now an automated process, and this fusion between high tech and the state is our third descent. And now the fourth final descent, before it gets too depressing, because obviously there's got to be possibility and good elements. But yeah, maybe one other thing about the tech, our tech overlords and David. I mean, David was like really early in saying, the US system is organized corruption, and it's about using wealth to create power, power to create more wealth, wealth to create more power. And I mean, Elon Musk you just see this absolutely perfectly. I mean, not only is he, I'm making up this stat, but I think it's probably true. But if it's not actually true, what it says about reality is true, right? Elon Musk is the largest recipient of government subsidies in the history of the world. May not be true, but it's in the direction of it's in the direction of truth.
Cancelling public spending,
yes,
so as to invest it in SpaceX. So the public spending that's being cut at the moment is actually the difference is going into SpaceX.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the flying cars and stuff, NASA was the one thing that sort of did some exciting stuff, and it's now SpaceX contracts. It's now basically privatized. So our final descent, sixth and seventh together, 6.25 to 7th ring of hell. The far right going everywhere. And David will obviously see this very much as a symptom, not a cause of the problem. And I sort of view it as the inverse side, like the obvious result of another quote taken from David from Bullshit Jobs, which is like, why are there bullshit jobs? Why is the ruling class has figured out that happy, productive population with free time on their hands is a mortal danger. Obviously true. Now, you take that further. Okay, so they filled up our time with, nonsense stuff and, emails from your boss at silly o'clock and this concept of the Sunday scaries and all of this stuff, which they've injected. But then, you take that a logical step further, and that is the only thing that can give some vital energy to people is a form of organized hatred. And it's a form of organized hatred, not only for the sake of hatred, but it's also the only counter-economic argument, right? Most of the reform far-right stuff in Britain, for example, is mainly an economic argument. It doesn't take the form of an economic argument, but that's the work it's doing. When they say it is the fault of migrants, Muslims, and minorities, they are saying, and that's why the economy doesn't work. That's why you can't get it. That's why you can't get whatever it is that you should reasonably expect to be able to get in a moderately technologically advanced society. Now, of course, that's a totally bogus argument, but it's providing some explanation for why we aren't allowed to be a happy, productive set of people, because obviously that's what we all have a yearning to be. So a little bit of rise back to possibilities, back to more positive things that are happening in this moment. So one is a really big one, which is we have the end of the unipolar fantasy, right? This idea that one force, Nika was saying at the beginning, watching the US empire implode. I mean, it's also there's most violent, exactly as you said, most violent, most dangerous. But it is also responding to a reality in which more manufacturing production is in China. The moral authority in the world has swung dramatically to the south. Most peoples on Earth, like Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, said, see in Gaza the future that they want for us. And this has, I think, opened up profound possibilities. It doesn't mean it's all going to be good. It doesn't mean that every state, every force that isn't the US is going to be doing positive things, far from it, but it opens up a huge potential vista for doing things in a different way with different alliances from below. And I see this even in a small way, it's beginning to turn things. So my normal job, I work for the Progressive International, which is a global network of member organizations who are trade unions, political parties, social movements, national liberation movement, campaign groups, blah, 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 peasants unions and so on around the world. And maybe 2 weeks ago, we convened 9 states in The Hague to launch a group to take action against Israel's violations of international law, to block ships from their ports, to block arms from going Israel, and to arrest Netanyahu if he comes to their countries and so on. And then I was speaking yesterday, I think, to someone very high up in a not like totally mainstream humanitarian NGO who was saying, yeah, I think we're going to have to really readjust ourselves. I said, what do you mean? So, well, basically our strategy has been, implicitly, it's like we're trying to convince the marginal, well-meaning liberal in DC, Brussels, London to be a bit nicer in this particular direction. It's like that has got us worse than nothing. And we were specifically talking in the context of rebuilding Gaza, which is there's no point lobbying for British money to rebuild a thing or Brussels, basically the people who destroyed it to rebuild it going to have to build with new alliances from states which may have less money but have a more real, a more mutual, a more solidaristic engagement. And we're seeing these sorts of things again, like Trump is sanctioning South Africa for leading against the destruction of Palestine and standing firmly in the tradition of national liberation. And again, speaking to people who say, the money to lose US market access, other states will pick up, that the trade can go somewhere else, that suddenly there are these openings where people look and say, oh, we've been looking only this way, and this way actually hates us, so we should look elsewhere. So that's one that opens up big vistas of possibility. And as we sit here in the UK, again, going back to the point about sitting in the colonial mode of production, I think our role is to, here sitting in a country that is part of the, whose government and ruling class is a key node in that, to be allied to these forces that are emerging, that in incomplete and sometimes contradictory ways, are trying to assert some independence and openness. And and here's the final point towards moving in the direction of heaven, hopefully. David really liked Marcel Mauss, right? Really liked him, and Mauss is great. And the thing that David always focused on, which I love, is like the idea that no society, no social arrangement, of which there are infinite varieties, are ever just one thing or just another thing. In fact, you know, the Maussian argument is, you know, is hierarchy, exchange, and communism all exist just in different weightings in every single social system. And so if we wish to have a much more egalitarian, more communistic type social system, we should be looking at where does that already exist in our lives, and where are the gaps in which that exists, and where are the possibilities to change that. And one like final thing to take a hopeful thing. So firstly, things always look kind of bleak until they don't, right? Like David says somewhere, I can't remember, that like revolutions are normally a planetary phenomena. They like have a tendency to happen in a lot of places, all at once. And so one final sort of thing that I want to take, that we can all take. I took one thing from the Dawn of Everything book, which is this word schismogenesis, right? In Dawn of Everything's endlessly got these examples of like this group of people do everything totally different from this group of people because we're next to it. Now, going back to the point about emotional labor and understanding things on the, you know, on the power gradient, like we really understand the psychopaths who have been running our world, right? We really understand them because we've had to really understand them because they run the world and they can kill people. So let's use our understanding of them to do schismogenesis, to build a thing which is the polar opposite of that, which is the complete, you know, at every point, it's way easier to just do the opposite of something than to work out things. Let's just look at what they do, look at how they act, and do the precise opposite, building on the communism that is already, in the most sense, that is already present in our society.
Sure, I've got a grand total of 4 minutes, but I just want to say, James, I mean, that really illustrates, I think that was a beautiful way to bring together a lot of the pressing present day concerns with also a lot of the ideas that were latent within David, and possibly, as both of us have agreed, sort of maybe more kind of speaking more eloquently than ever before. I do the sort of broader point, are we now entering a new age of revolutions? History says they do. Sort of, there are moments when it becomes undeniable and inescapable that systemic collapse is happening, and that when it does take place can be initially very vicious, and it may look sort of it's darkest the moment before the dawn. Now that sounds trite and that sounds easy promises. That's not what I think David was trying to say. It's not what I'm trying to say. I think what I took from what you were saying, James, is that there is no escaping or denying or evading the fact that our faith, our trust, our continual habitual deference to authorities, be they laws, be they rights, be they rules, be they leviathans, we can't hide behind them anymore. So actually, the very first step to reclaim power that we should take is just to acknowledge that we have a responsibility. And from that point, well, then I think many things will be possible. I'm going to end on possibility. I'm going to end on possibility, and I'm afraid I have to dash back to Norfolk. I'm so sorry not to be able to hear more of your thoughts or questions. I will be at the How the Lights Get In festival in May at the Hay, as part of the Hay Festival, and I believe James will be too. So if any of you can get along there, it'd be great to see you all. All right, James, thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Nika, thank you, and thank you to all you guys.
Thank you so much.